All right, folks, this is osseous tissue 6-3 to 6-4, and this is the true tissue part of it, of bones. So we're going to look at the tissues. So first of all, the bone cells. A mature bone cell is called an osteocyte. You can see that right here. But an osteocyte doesn't make new bone. And now it maintains bone, so it can maintain the bone that's there. It can add calcium to the bone that's there. But the way new bone is formed starts with a collagen matrix. So osteocytes can't lay down collagen. So if they can't lay down collagen, then they can't make new bone. All they can do is take the bone that's there and maintain it, and they can maintain it by adding minerals like calcium apatite or calcium to the bone that's already there. So how do we get to this mature osteocyte, and what bone makes bone, and what cell makes bone anyway? And the answer is osteoblasts make bone. These make new bone. And then osteoblasts will actually mature into an osteocyte. When it's done making the new bone, it matures into the osteocyte and just maintains the bone that's around it. Well, where did this osteoblast come from? Well, these osteoblasts came from these osteoprogenitor cells, sometimes called osteogenic cells, and I should write that for you because I think your book calls it that, osteogenic cells. So these osteogenic cells, they differentiate into osteoblasts, and then osteoblasts can lay down new bone, and then they mature into osteocytes that live in the lacunae, as you saw in lab, and the osteocytes maintain the bone that's there. However, we can't just have static bone. If you learn nothing else from this chapter, I hope you take away from this chapter that bone is highly metabolic. It's very metabolically active. It's not this static, dead tissue that you might be thinking of right now. It's very metabolically active. And we not only build bone, but we break it down. And it's these osteoclasts that break down the bone. So osteoclasts break down bone, they digest it, they dissolve it. I'm saying different ways of saying the same thing. And osteoblasts build new bone. So osteoblasts and osteoclasts do the opposite types of things. All right, if you look at what makes up a bone, you can see that 2/3 of it, 66.67% of it, is inorganic matrix, a calcium phosphate matrix right here. And what do we call this calcium phosphate matrix when it's laid down in its crystal form? We call it hydroxyapatite. And that's not appetite like you're hungry either. You can see it's spelled A-P-A-T-I-T-E. And this is the chemical formula for hydroxyapatite. All right, so that's 2/3 of your bone right there. Well, what's the other 1/3? Protein called collagen. It's protein. Now, as you're going to see here shortly, it is possible to dissolve away the crystal hydroxyapatite, and what you're left with is a really flexible bone. Because what is it? Just collagen. And in fact, you could take a chicken bone. You could take a chicken bone and you could soak it in vinegar overnight. And what the vinegar is going to do is dissolve out the hydroxyapatite. And the next day, you'll be able to take that bone and tie it in a knot. And I know you probably don't believe me, but why don't you do it? Why don't you next time you're going to cook a chicken, before you cook it, pull out one of the bones, pretty decent sized bone, and soak it in vinegar overnight. By the way, take all the flesh off it, all the meat and stuff off. I just want you to do it to the bone. I don't want a bunch of chicken meat soaking in vinegar for you. And then take the bone out the next morning out of the vinegar and see how flexible it is. It'll be pretty darn flexible. So the matrix portion of the bone is just the collagen protein. So that's what makes up the bone. You have matrix proteins, which is collagen, and the minerals of the matrix, which is hydroxyapatite. All right, this is showing you an osteocyte. This is a mature bone cell right here. And of course, as you learned in lab, osteocytes send out these pseudopods. So this osteocyte is sending out a pseudopod, and this osteocyte is sending out a pseudopod. Someplace in here, there's a gap junction between them, and they can share nutrients because of these gap junctions. All right, so that's an osteocyte, a mature cell. And by the way, what you're reading right here is where do these pseudopods, how do they grow through this hard matrix? Because this is hard matrix right here. As you know, a bone is hard. That's hard matrix. Well, the pseudopods of the soft cell grow through these small canals called canaliculi. All right? And what they do is they maintain the bone. That's what they do. They maintain it. But they don't build new bone. All right, so let's be clear. This osteocyte here can't build new bone, but it can maintain what you see right here. It can maintain that. But it can't add anything new. Just maintain what's there. All right, osteoprogenitor cells. These are found underneath the periosteum and the endosteum of a bone. So what I have here is I have a periosteum covering this bone out here, and I have an endosteum covering this bone in here. So I have an endosteum covering my medullary cavity, and I have a periosteum surrounding the entire bone. In my osteoprogenitor cells, or also known as osteogenic cells, are found between the periosteum and the bone, and they're found interspersed within the endosteum. And this is showing you an osteogenic cell right here, interspersed within these endosteal cells. So what does an osteogenic cell do? It is a stem cell that can divide to produce osteoblasts. And osteoblasts build new bone. So osteogenic cells are the precursors of osteoblasts. That's what they are. And here's the osteoblast. These are osteoblasts. So now what they can do is they can lay down protein matrix right here, and that's called osteoid. It's protein matrix. It's primarily collagen. All right, so they lay down this osteoid. The osteoid is this protein matrix or organic matrix because it's not inorganic. There's no minerals in it yet. There's no calcium in it yet. And after the osteoblast laid down this osteoid, then they can start mineralizing it. And both of those together is called ossification. So you see, ossification isn't exactly calcification, although calcification is part of ossification. So I hope you see that. Calcification is part of ossification. But ossification is building this new bone. And you got to do more than just add calcium to something. What are you adding calcium to? A vacuum? No, you have an osteoid. You have a protein matrix to start with. The formation of bone is called osteogenesis. This is the word right here, osteogenesis. By the way, I'm going to give you the opposite of osteogenesis in a second. It's called osteolysis. That's when you break down bone. So osteogenesis versus osteolysis. All right. Now osteoblasts will become osteocytes after they build their bone. And here's why. Osteoblasts will build bone and surround themselves by hard bone. And now what? Well, now what is they mature into osteocytes and they live in the lacuna. Happily ever after, non-mitotic. They no longer divide after they mature into osteocytes. And they just sit there and maintain the bone around them. Osteoclasts, on the other hand, do osteolysis. They break down bone. They don't build new bone. They break down bone. And what they do is this is multinucleated. These are nuclei right here. And they're multinucleated for a reason. They're actually a fusion of many cells. But what I really want to talk about is how does this osteoclast break down this bone? It secretes its lysosomal contents into this bay right here. This is called a bay. It's actually called a resorption bay because I'm resorbing the bone. So there's lysosomes in osteoclasts, and you guys know what lysosomes are. There are these little organelles, membrane-bound organelles that contain digestive enzymes and things like this, and acids and digestive enzymes. And they secrete their lysosomal products into this bay, and that digests the bone. Now, when I digest this bone, what do I do with it? Well, the minerals are reabsorbed into, for one thing, the bloodstream. So when I digest bone, the blood gains calcium. And we'll talk about the homeostatic mechanisms involved with that. But for right now, let's just say osteoclasts break down bone. Now, osteoclasts don't come from the same... Well, let me not talk about that yet. Let's talk about this picture first. How do I secrete lysosomal contents onto bone and not hurt the rest of... I mean, how do I digest one part of the bone and not the whole darn thing? How do I digest bone and not the ligaments? How do I digest bone and not the muscles attached to it? Well, what happens is osteoclasts seal themselves onto an area. These are called podosomes right here. I just circled the podosome. And they seal themselves onto this bone. Now think three-dimensionally. These podosomes are coming out of the screen and back into the screen, so they make a whole circle of sealed podosomes. And then when they secrete their enzymes and acids right here, those enzymes and acids don't go anywhere. They are a sealed compartment, as it's telling you. And it only digests the bones in this resorption bay right here. This is called a resorption bay. So that's how osteoclasts keep from hurting neighboring areas, and they only digest the one little area that they're sealed off. Now, this is what I started to say earlier. Osteoclasts don't come from the same progenitor or cell lineage as osteoblasts do. Osteoclasts have a different lineage. Wow, can I not spell today or what? Osteoclasts have a different lineage than osteoblasts. I'm going to say something. I'm going to tell you something pretty cool here. The lineage. You can see the lineage here. You have stem cells becoming osteoclasts, and it's really a fusion of a bunch of these cells which give an osteoclast its multinucleated appearance. Now, what I'm going to tell you is kind of cool. Is the lineage that osteoclasts come from is the same lineage that monocytes come from. So it's the monocyte lineage. But that shouldn't surprise you, because monocytes are white blood cells, and where are white blood cells made anyway? And the answer is bone marrow. So the stem cells that give rise to monocytes are right there in the bone marrow, and the stem cells that give rise to osteoclasts are right there in the bone marrow. So osteoclasts come from this monocyte lineage. All right, so that's an osteoclast digesting bone. And you can see the resorption bay right here. These are your cells: osteocyte, osteoblast, osteoclast, and osteogenic cell. Make sure you know them all. All right, I'll see you in the next section.